The 10.2 tier sets have been revealed for all class and all specs, and they are bonkers. Some of these bonuses are really awesome. They will completely change how your spec plays. Some of them are a little bit dry and lackluster, but overall it seems like a really cool time to check all the tier sets, and it's 38, and there's one or two that will probably blow your mind or change your decision for your main. It did for mine, so let's check them out. Now for blood, we have the 2-step bonus. Consuming a bone shield charge has a chance to cause your next hard strike to apply Ashen Decay, reducing damage dealt to you by 10% and increasing your damage dealt to afflicted targets by 20% for 8 seconds. Off the bat, this bonus seems pretty decent. However, a big caveat is the chance to cause your next hard strike to apply Ashen Decay, because the bonus is being so strong, you kind of have to really factor in uptime. In single target, this will probably have a lower proc chance because you're not consuming bone shields as much as possible, especially in raids. Especially if you're not the active tank, this will provide you with 0 bonuses during raiding, which is a little bit lackluster, very lackluster in terms of how it procs. However, in Mythic Plus, this could be really nutty depending on how they actually trigger it. I expect at least the 2 set to proc differently in single target, because once again, if you're not the main tank, you will probably not see this half the time, which is why I have a 2 set that's not active half the time. The 4 set makes Soul Reaper's execute damage and Abomination Limbs damage apply Ashen Decay to enemy targets, and Hard Strike and Blood Bowl's direct damage extend Ashen Decay. Obviously, this kind of counteracts the 2 set issues in single target, because everything about this works fantastic in AoE, but then again, you have to wait for execute to have a consistent uptime with Soul Reaper, or once or twice throughout the fight with Abomination Limb, which you never want to, you know, save these cooldowns for the off chance that you're not being able to apply them, because once again, AoE is probably going to be up pretty much all the time, or at least as much as it possibly can, with no actual imposed downtime. For Frost Death Knight, we're seeing some interesting stuff with Chill Streak. This is kind of cool because Chill Streak has been really cool and we haven't been able to play with it for a while. The 2-step bonuses makes Chill Streak range increase by 4 yards and can bounce off of you. Each time Chill Streak bounces off of an enemy, so not you, your damage is increased by 4% for 10 seconds, up to 5 times, essentially stacking up to 20% increased damage. Once again, clearly this has more applications and better results in AoE, since it will most likely just bounce off of enemies 100% of the time, unless you're just on the boss fight, because half the time it will bounce off of you, so you will only get this buff a little bit slower. Now, the 4 set makes Chill Streak bounce 2 additional times, probably making it a lot better for single target, and each time it bounces, you have a 40% chance to gain a rune, reduce Chill Streak cooldown by 5 seconds, or reduce the cooldown of Empower Rune Weapon by 10 seconds. Now, this conditional situation is questionable, because I would imagine it would prioritize, it would make sense, prioritize Empower Rune Weapon. If Empower Rune Weapon is not on cooldown, which is weird because you're probably always going to press it, then it will go to Chill Streak and reduce Chill Streak's cooldown, or essentially give you a rune. I don't know if I particularly like the way this functions, because it's 2 RNG and it does way too many different things. Not to mention, it will most likely desync some cooldowns depending on how the RNG actually works. So I am not particularly a fan. I like the 40% chance to gain a rune. I think that's cool. Maybe Chill Streak cooldown, but I think adding it to Empower Rune Weapon might just be a little bit weird, especially since it's RNG. Maybe just keep one of these 3 effects. Even if it desyncs the cooldown, it might be a little bit too much to have an RNG between 3 effects and just be super wonky all the time. Unholy has a more passive one, because the Frost obviously will make you forcibly pick Chill Streak, while Unholy remains fairly standard. Apocalypse will summon an additional Magus of the Dead, and your Magus of the Dead Shadow Bolt now fires a volley of Shadow Bolts on up to 4 nearby enemies, which is good because it does provide AoE, and that's another source of AoE from a pure single target ability, which is really good because that's part of what Unholy has been struggling with, is that its big ghoul cooldowns are usually just single target. The 4 set makes each rune you spend increase the duration of your Actus Magus by 0.5 seconds, and we can assume this is the Magus that you summon additionally through Apocalypse, and your Magus will now also cast Amplify damage, increasing the damage you deal by 5% for 10 seconds. Now, once again, we don't know exactly how this will function once the raid releases. Does Amplify damage apply instantly as the Magus is summoned once Apocalypse is up? Does it have some inferred cooldown because the pet has to come out, has to finish its summoning animation, has to start its cast time? Does it do stuff like that? We yet don't know how that's going to end up being applied in the end, because PTR always changes back and forth. The 5% extra damage is nice, bonus. It's for 10 seconds. I don't know if by extending constantly your Magus's uptime, does it recast this once the 10-second falls off? I guess we'll have to see. Demon Hunter, this will be a little bit harder to judge, and we will have a video on it because Demon Hunter is also getting reworks, slight talent changes. First of all, Havoc has each slash of Blade Dance a 50% chance to throw a glaive at an enemy for 35% damage. I would imagine that would be 35% of its normal damage, but that sounds very, very, very low. So I think it might make sense for 35% additional throw glaive damage. Or is it 35% damage of the Blade Dance's damage put into the throw glaive? I don't know. It's not very clear. Throw glaive also reduces the remaining cooldown of the hunt by 0.4 seconds, and the hunt's damage over time effect lasts 4 seconds longer. Usually I am all for this style of design because the hunt is really cool. Cooldown doesn't feel particularly amazing, not as much as meta, but even meta is a little bit lackluster. But they will probably play with the cooldown reduction, with the chance to proc, to kind of, you know, give the hunt a specific uptime. Usually that's how it is. Whenever they're designing a mechanic that reduces the cooldown of a main ability, it usually reduces the cooldown by about 60% at the very most. So I'm not 100% sure how that's going to play out because it depends on how strong the hunt is. It depends on how strong throw glaive is. A lot of these things will change, so stay tuned. Vengeance makes Sigil of Flame's periodic damage have a chance to flare up, shattering an additional soul fragment from a target, obviously probably multiple soul fragments in AoE, and dealing additional damage. Each 40 fury you spend reduces its cooldown by 1 second, which, I mean, it's cool. Now, it depends on how the mechanics of Vengeance will play out, because right now you end up sometimes capping fury, sometimes it doesn't feel like spending fury is a priority for Vengeance. You probably just want to spend your soul shards rather on spirit bombs more so than spending your fury. I want to spend my fury, I want fury to be important, so maybe this 2 set will make fury actually matter and your fury economy be better, and maybe something akin to what Prot Warrior maybe has with Rage. The 4 set bonuses: when you attack a target afflicted by Sigil of Flame, your damage and healing are increased by 2% and your maximum health is increased by 2% for 8 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. Now, because I've read all of these bonuses beforehand, we know that some of the buffs that keep stacking up, they essentially make it, they essentially word it rather in a way that they overlap, as in they don't refresh each other. So what this leads me to believe is that this will actually refresh itself. So you will have 2% damage, 2% health for 8 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. Obviously it's 10%, but this can probably be refreshed so long as the Sigil of Flame debuff is up. I would imagine that that's kind of how it will play, and it would make a little bit more sense. It would kind of feel slightly similar to what Guardian has now, where through its rotation it gets an increased bonus in HP and stuff like that. So this will probably function really well, assumingly they will tune the knobs on the percentage of damage and healing and HP just to kind of make Vengeance balance with the other tanks. For the Druid, we have Balance, one of the more boring sets, I have to admit. When Eclipse ends or when you enter combat, enter Dream State, reducing the cast time of your next 2 Starfires or Wraths by 40% and increasing their damage by 60%. This puts a lot more damage into your generators, which I guess that's fine. I'm not opposed either way. Reduced cast time is really nice for any caster. That's just a more fun mechanic. It would have been cool if they were instant, but I guess we have a lot of instant situations with Druid, period, so maybe that's not that particularly original. And to be fair, it might even be more interesting than the 4 set, which the 4 set states Star Surge or Star Fall increases your current Eclipse's arcane or nature damage bonus by an additional 3% up to 15%. This is just flat damage increase. I don't see how this will change your rotation in any way, because you will want to spend your astral power as much as possible. Maybe you will want to bank astral power now before going into an eclipse so that you can dump it really quick and have that 15% additional damage bonus up as much as possible. Now, this will probably skew Balance into relying heavily on mastery. This, because, you know, Eclipse's arcane nature damage is usually bumped by mastery, so maybe that's how it's going to be for future Balance Druids. Going into Feral, this is a little bit more interesting. Feral Frenzy, which you're going to have to talent into, grants Smoldering Frenzy, increasing all damage you deal by 20% for 8 seconds. That is pretty nuts. 20% increased damage usually is a big buff for an ability that I don't think Feral Frenzy has that big of a cooldown. Right now, it's sitting at 45 seconds cooldown, so 8 out of those 45 seconds, you're gonna have 20% extra damage, which sounds really well. You'll probably want to kind of time this with other damage dealing windows to kind of, you know, make the most out of that 20%. The 4 set makes Feral Frenzy cooldown reduced by 15 seconds, so scratch that. that, it's going to be 30 seconds. And during Smoldering Frenzy, so during those 8 seconds, enemies burn for 10% of the damage you deal as fire over 10 seconds. This is really cool and can be potentially really strong if this stacks. So essentially, let's say you're in AoE, because in single target, and even in single target, you're in Smoldering Frenzy. You press Primal Wrath or you press Rip, and then you like refresh bleeds. I'm thinking mostly in AoE. Or you're, using bites or anything, and you put a 10-second fire damage dot. I would imagine that every other ability that you keep adding keeps adding damage over that 10 seconds, kind of making this like Fire Mage's Ignite, where the dot keeps reapplying more and more damage as you do your rotation. Obviously, this is really good for Fire Mage and has been really good for a while. This style of mechanic, this could probably be really good for Feral Druid as well. Hopefully, the damage knobs are going to be consistent so that the spec can essentially perform, where Ferals won't feel bad for the, I don't know, I guess 2 tiers in a row. Maybe the first tier wasn't that bad. Guardian Druid gets a 2-set, 20% of all the damage and healing, and 100% of the armor you gain during Rage of the Sleeper fuel the growth of Dream Thorns, which wreath you in their protection after Rage of the Sleeper expires, absorbing 10% of the damage dealt to you while the thorns remain. Now, first of all, obviously, you're going to have to talent into Rage of the Sleeper, which is kind of what you're using all the time anyway, so maybe that's not that big of a deal. But so far, the tuning knobs on the percentages seem very, very, very big. This seems very strong because all of this essentially seems to give you an absorb shield for all of the damage and the armor that you had during Rage of the Sleeper. That absorb shield seems to be very fat and will soak 10% of the damage that the enemies will deal to you as it persists. It doesn't seem to have a particular duration, so let's say you accumulate a 2 million Dream Thorns shield and you'll be able to soak 10% of the damage that you deal until those 2 million or whatever the number will be gets to be depleted. So it's kind of like a very, very budget ignore pain. It's going to be passive, it's going to be Rage of the Sleeper, and most of all, it's probably going to add on top of everything else that Bear has. For the 4-set, each 40 rage you spend while Rage of the Sleeper is active, it extends its duration by 1 second up to 5. This is really good because Rage of the Sleeper is still a really good cooldown. Your Dream Thorns become Blazing Thorns, causing damage absorbed to be reflected at the attacker. This is where the tier set gets nutty. I wouldn't be surprised if the 2-set will be nerfed, because the damage that you end up absorbing can be pretty big, considering that you're also extending its duration, which is really good, and you're also doing more damage through all of that time. And if you reflect the damage, this can be amazing. It's, first of all, it's a cool system, it's a cool tier set, but it sounds very strong at the moment, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to get knocked down a peg. For Restoration, your 2-set says you and your Grove Guardians nourishes, so you will have to talent it to Grove Guardian, now heal 2 additional allies within 40 yards at 40% effectiveness. This is a really cool change in the Grove Guardian's functionality, because obviously it adds cleave healing, which is great. And the 4-set is the kicker. Clear casting now causes your regrowth to also cast Nourish onto a nearby injured ally at 200% effectiveness, preferring those with your heal over time effect on. So I would imagine you can cast this on your tank and also heal the closest damaged player, which sounds fantastic. First of all, once again, similar to Guardian Druid, these numbers sound pretty ridiculous considering that Nourish is, for all intents and purposes, free, and you're going to be casting a lot of clear cast and regrowths. So that is very interesting. Obviously, it kind of focuses your playstyle into a certain niche, which I don't know if that's particularly bad, but obviously how they tune the numbers will matter, because this currently right now still sounds pretty strong. Moving into Augmentation for Evoker, for the 2-set bonus, every third prescience lasts 100% longer. Prescience, if I'm not mistaken, is the buff that you do to increase the crit chance of the person, and I guess obviously increased durations is really good. You might have more uptime on prescience on multiple targets, which is obviously what the tier set is trying to accomplish, especially if you read the 4-set. Casting prescience enhances your next eruption with smaller fissures for each prescience you have active. I don't know how many you will be able to have active effectively as your gear scales and probably have more haste, can cast more of them, but the more you have active, the better it is, because each will deal 110% spell power damage and extends Ebon Might by 0.2 seconds. Obviously, by each one that's active, the Ebon Might will be extended. That just works into the augmentation's theme and how the spec actually plays with the extension of Ebon Might, and puts very heavy focus on prescience. I don't think prescience has not been talented so far by augmentation, to my knowledge, so you're not essentially changing much of your build. You're still gonna have prescience, you're just not gonna be able to not pick it. For Devastation, the 2-set bonus says while Dragon Rage is active, you gain Emerald Trance every 6 seconds, increasing your damage done by 5%, stacking up to 5 times. So obviously this can get all the way up to 25% extra damage, which is really good, but what I don't see here is an expiration on the buff. It doesn't seem like the buff will expire. You would think that the buff expires when Dragon Rage is out. By extending Dragon Rage, obviously the buff will probably be better, so we'll still see exactly how it functions mechanically. While the 4 set says when Dragon Rage ends, Emerald Trance persists for 5 seconds per stack and grants you Essence Burst every 5 seconds. This is a pretty neat tier set where you're just kind of fueling all the cool stuff that Devastation can do, give you more access to pyres and disintegration beams and all of that stuff, which is really cool. Again, the amount of uptime, how it procs and all of that stuff will probably have to wait additional testing. Preservation has, for the 2 set, empower spells cast Living Flame at enemies or allies struck at 40% effectiveness, which obviously is really good because Living Flame can also heal. Now, for the 4 set, Living Flame has a chance to apply Echo at 100% effectiveness on allies healed or a nearby ally who doesn't already have Echo. Now, once again, this matters in the way that the chance is made into the game because obviously it's RNG, and most of the empowered spells on Preservation, especially the ones that heal like Dream Breath, don't have an infinite target cap, so they are capped. So if you're shooting it at targets, you might want to prefer targets that don't have Echo, and there's also a chance of Echo being applied. Overall, over the course of a fight, this can create some consistent healing output, which is really nice, and having abilities and heals proc freely off of other abilities functions really nice for healers where you don't have to worry too much about mana. It's similar to how Resto Druid gets free casts of healing spells by casting other spells. For the Hunter, Beast Mastery has one of the simpler but potentially strongest tier set bonuses as well. The 2 set bonus makes Bestial Wrath summon a dire beast for 15 seconds, which that's great. On its own, it probably will suck, or at least be just very meh. The 4 set, however, makes dire beast now obey your kill command and gain beast leave. This is where the tier set might go out of control, and once you get your 4 set, you're probably going to be locked into the left-hand side of the talent tree, which is kind of what you've been playing so far. So that's maybe the cons of Beast Mastery, because it doesn't really offer more talent variety. You're probably going to be playing your single target build in AoE while just switching a couple of talents to get that multi-shot and beast cleave talents for Mythic Plus and usually AoE raid fights. Marksmanship, however, has one of the most fantastic tier sets, by the way. The 2 set bonus makes rapid fire launch a volley at the target for 2 seconds. Now, we haven't been able to properly test this yet, but does this also work with salvo, where you pop salvo before you use a rapid fire, launches a volley, it applies explosive shot as well? Obviously, you won't get more uptime on salvo, but this can change how your burst actually functions. And the 4 set makes Legacy of the Windrunner now give volley a 15% chance to fire wind arrows at targets when dealing damage. The mechanic sounds really cool, but I think that 15% chance might need to be buffed a little bit to a higher percent chance, because this will probably do almost nothing in single target, considering that volley lasts for very few seconds. Obviously, you're gonna have way more volleys with rapid fire, and what this essentially makes it so that in AoE you might not ever have to press multi-shot, or maybe you probably will have to press multi-shot before rapid fire. I don't know how this functions, because once you activate volley, you get trick shots if you have the talents, right? Do you get the trick shots on the rapid fire that casts volley, or do you have to pop trick shots before rapid fire? That's something that we need to test and see exactly how it functions, because this can definitely improve Marksmanship's AoE issues that it's been having in this season. Survival gets also a lot of Fury of the Eagle love, so you're going to have to be talented into this one for the entire season. Fury of the Eagle increases you and your pet's critical strike chance by 15% and critical strike damage dealt by 15% for 12 seconds. Mediocre buff, it is nice, great. For the 4 set, however, Fury of the Eagle throws a free wildfire bomb at your current target at 100% effectiveness, generates 1 charge of wildfire bomb, and increases the damage wildfire bomb deals to your primary target by 40% for 12 seconds. This can be giga bonkers. Think about it this way. This will function similarly to how Beast Mastery wants to shoot out all of its barb shots before popping Bestial Wrath, and you'll probably want to shoot out all of your wildfire bombs before popping Fury of the Eagle. This style of playstyle is really fun for Beast Mastery, and I would imagine it's going to be very fun for survival as well. And the fact that Wildfire Bomb will deal more single target damage will just make it even more important single target. And once again, we will have a very heavy focus Wildfire Bomb on survival. Yay! Rejoice, bomb lovers. Moving to Paladin, the 2 set for Holy says when Glimmer of Light dissipates or is refreshed, it creates a holy reverberation on its target to heal an ally or damage an enemy for over 8 seconds. Multiple holy reverberations may overlap up to 3 times. Now, is this a dot or is just like pulsating damage? Well, it's good that they can overlap, and I mentioned this before, which means, you know, those 8 seconds are not refreshed. The 4 set bonus says the cooldown of Daybreak is reduced by 15 seconds, so you will use Daybreak pretty much all the time. These tier sets go through very heavy changes throughout the PTR. Red has a 2 set bonus that's very interesting. Expurgation lasts an additional 4 seconds and deals 50% increased damage. Okay, pretty cool. Casting Judgment or Divine Toll on a target with Expurgation causes Wrathful Sanction, dealing holy damage to the target and resonating 20% of the holy damage up to nearby enemies, for nearby enemies. It's kind of slightly reminiscent of Sanctified Wrath, where dealing your damage kind of spits out little bits of damage or in AoE, but this is target capped at 4 enemies in theme with Retribution. This is great AoE addition to your target, and the mechanic is really nice to kind of have Judgment be super important, which is kind of weird because with this tier set during Wings you don't really want to press Judgment anyway, so the playstyle will definitely change a little bit during the next season. The 4 set makes Wrathful Sanction grant you Echoes of Wrath, causing your next Templar's Verdict and Divine Storm to deal damage a second time at 50% effectiveness, so kind of like, you know, echoing its damage, and this effect does not consume Judgment. A couple of questions here. First of all, the writing is very specific. Causes your next Templar's Verdict and Divine Storm. Does that mean that you have to press both in single target and in AoE to kind of fully consume this proc? Because otherwise it would have just said or, right? We've had bonuses that we've just read before that said or. It does this for this ability or that ability, but it says and here, so it would lead me to believe that you will be using Templar's Verdict and Divine Storm to consume both of the buffs. Now, it does not consume Judgment, but you would imagine it would benefit from the Judgment's bonus damage. Now, this is weird because the damage echoes off of its initial cast. The initial cast normally would consume the Judgment effect, so there wouldn't be any Judgment effect for the echo if it happens after. Now, does that mean that the initial cast does not consume Judgment anyway? How would that work? Because that means that obviously both the hit and the echo will get the Judgment effect, which is normally great, but if you don't consume Judgment, you'll probably press Judgment before your next finisher, right? So wouldn't that just like kind of overlap and maybe waste some procs? I guess we'll have to test a little bit more. Protection Paladin has the 2 set bonuses saying Judgment grants a stack of Sanctification, increasing your armor by 1% per stack. Upon reaching 10 stacks, your next cast of Consecration is empowered, increasing its damage and healing by 200% and its radius by 30%. Sanctification stacks are reset when your empowered Consecration ends. I have a bone to pick with this tier set, but let's look at the 4 set first. While you are within an empowered Consecration, your abilities have a chance to deal 20% bonus damage or healing as fire. I think that this set is dog shit. Not necessarily that it won't be powerful or anything, but forcing Protection Paladins even more to rely on a Consecration and having to sit still is not something that, to my knowledge, I want to have the freedom as a tank to move the pack, move the boss, the way that the encounter dictates to kind of make the encounter and the phase better for everybody. The fact that you're within, you are even more forced to stay in that same Consecration. It's not just staying in any Consecration, you have to stay in that particular buffed up Consecration, otherwise you lose that bonus. So I am not a fan of this one. It might be very strong, but it creates a really unpleasant gameplay. We'll have to see. Maybe I'm wrong. For the Mage, the Arcane 2 set bonuses says consuming clear casting increases spell damage by 2% for 15 seconds, stacking up to 10%. Kind of boring, but hey, clear casting will become a more interesting thing to consume as an Arcane Mage. For the 4 set, after consuming clear casting 6 times, your next Arcane Missiles deals 75% increased damage and fires at up to enemies near your target. I would imagine there has to be a number there. Fires at up to 4 enemies. I would imagine it would have to cleave. I don't see it being at more than 4. Usually this is how the similar bonuses have been for the other classes, which I guess that's great. Arcane Missiles in AoE sounds really interesting. Obviously, the spectacle show will be incredible, but since the tooltip is not yet finished, I guess we'll have to wait. But this is one of the cooler ones. Simpler, but cooler. Fire Mage gets a 2 set that says when Pyroblast and Flame Strike critically strike, you gain Searing Rage, increasing your critical strike damage by 3% for 12 seconds, stacking up to 15%. This is actually pretty cool and kind of makes fire have more power within itself, and it makes me kind of hope that it won't rely so heavily on power infusion and augmentation. For the 4 set, activating combustion increases critical strike damage bonus of Searing Rage by 100% for 12 seconds. So big crits bonanza, that's exactly what's gonna happen, and a lot of that damage is also gonna be funneled into Ignite, so more dot damage. It's actually a pretty cool set. For Frost, the 2 set bonus, Glacial Spike damage increased. Yes, finally gets heavy focus on Glacial Spike. Damage is increased by 10% and it explodes when it shatters a frozen target, so you will want to shatter it 100% of the time, dealing 20% of its damage to nearby enemies. The damage dealt is reduced beyond 8 targets, so it's soft capped at 8 targets, which is great because now Glacial Spike has AoE functionality, and the fact that it's not hard capped at 4 targets is so much better. Can we get away with hard caps at 4 targets? The 4 set bonuses, casting Glacial Spike has a 40% chance to trigger Brain Freeze, which, you know, it's the buffs that you kind of always rotate and react to. I think that's cool. Obviously, the 2 set seems a lot more interesting. Moving to Monk, the Brewmaster has the 2 sets saying Breath of Fire deals 20% bonus damage as Shadow Flame and causes you to heal for 50% of all fire damage dealt. The 4 sets, your attacks against targets afflicted by Breath of Fire have a chance to deal 5% extra damage as Shadow Flame, and each Celestial Brew also grants a stagger absorb equal to the amount of the Shadow Flame damage you have dealt, causing damage delayed by stagger to instead be prevented. This sounds really cool. This is kind of like the Necrolord Brew that you have, where you get an extra chance to deal more damage, and each Celestial Brew also grants a stagger absorb equal to the amount of Shadow Flame damage you have dealt. So it doesn't absorb damage, it just absorbs the stagger, causing damage delayed by stagger to instead be prevented. So it's kind of like Purifying Brew instead of it's just an absorb. So you're kind of purifying some of the stagger with Celestial Brew as well, leaving the absorb from Celestial Brew to actually function more on the damage that you're going to be receiving, which I guess that's great. Now there's a lot of percent bonuses here, and Brewmaster is already doing a lot of damage, so I'll wait to see how they tune that. Mistweaver has Renewing Mist and its jump supply Chi Harmony on a 2 set bonuses, increasing its target's healing taken from you by 50% for 8 seconds. That's a lot of healing, and that's for 8 seconds. And okay, cool. But it only applies when the Renewing Mist jump, and that's, I don't really want to call it unreliable, but it happens once it expires or once the target gets full HP. Does it apply the Chi Harmony to the new target? Because if it leaves it on the old target, isn't that kind of useless? It has to apply Chi Harmony on the target that is jumping to, not on the target that is jumping from. Anyway, the 4 set, 15% of all healing you do to targets with Chi Harmony is stored and then dispersed evenly among your allies with Renewing Mist when Chi Harmony fades or is refreshed. Again, I am on the fence with this one. Obviously, I'm not a main Mistweaver, so I don't know how this will function, but it feels like it's relying a lot on when Renewing Mist jumps from an ally to another. Okay, sure, but I don't know if it's reliable or not. I guess we'll have to see. Hopefully, because Mistweaver needs something. Windwalker, 2 set bonus. Melee attacks have a chance to make your next spinning crane kick free. more spins. Free spinning crane kicks grant Ebon Toes, increasing the damage of your next blackout kick by 100%. Now, this obviously translates into single target damage, which is something that we are aware of Windwalker struggles with. The 4 set makes Ebon Toes empowered blackout kicks reduce the cooldown of Fists of Fury, Rising Sun Kick, Strike of the Windlord, and Whirling Dragon Punch by 1 second, meaning you will want to be talented in both Strike of the Windlord and Whirling Dragon Punch, and most likely all of the Spinning Crane Kick talents. I think that's possible with the talent setup, but it's a very restrictive playstyle. On the first look of it, it sounds like you need a lot of talents to make full use out of the tier set, which is the first spec that we see being forced into this. I don't know how I feel about that, but if it works, it works. Discipline Priest, 2 set bonus. Smite and Penance damage increased by 20%, and Smite extends the duration of an active atonement by 2 seconds. This, of course, sounds like it extends the duration of a random atonement by 2 seconds. It's not a particular one unless you just have one atonement up. Extending atonement is really nice because you can essentially have more overall uptime on atonement. The 20% increased damage is also really good. The 4 set, Smite has a 100% chance to cast an additional time during Shadow Covenant, dealing shadow damage. So once again, you're gonna have to talent into Shadow Covenant if you haven't been talenting already. It's a lot of focus on Smite, which is very interesting because I think I actually like it, because Smite used to be, you know, the spammable ability during your atonement ramp up, or, you know, the resolution of the ramp up so that you heal a lot through atonement. I like atonement Summon Healing. I feel like this pushes Atonement Healing more, which is great to see for Discipline. Holy. 2-set bonus. Holy Word Serenity applies 14 seconds of Renew to its target. Wow, okay. Holy Word Sanctify applies 5 seconds of Renew to allies it heals. Now, 4-set Renew's Healing has a chance to cause your next Holy Word Sanctify or Holy Word Serenity to not consume a charge when cast and costs 50% less mana, stacking up to 2 times. First of all, this does not refresh, when the 4-set procs does not refresh the cooldown on Serenity and Sanctify, but it can bank up those charges 2 times until essentially it comes off cooldown. And when you cast it, once it comes off cooldown, you can essentially have 3 casts of each that potentially put more renews out that give you, well, it won't give you more charges. It's always at 2. This sounds very strong. Does this mean you can cast 3 of the Holy Words back to back? Because you get the 2 stacks, right? And neither of those 2 stacks of the buff, or is that the buff only in the cost in the terms of mana reduction? Because that would be a little bit boring. But if stacking up to 2 times makes it so that each of those 2 additional times makes Serenity, for instance, not consume the charge, meaning that it's not going to go on cooldown, to cast it twice, and then you have the 3rd cast that's not buffed by the 4-set that essentially puts the spell on cooldown, so you can cast it 3 times. This sounds like incredibly nutty burst. Once again, it's on a healer, and it's if it's required, because if you don't have to heal, you're probably gonna use them to just extend renews on targets, I would imagine. Which sounds a little bit shitty, because the bonus healing, because the heal that you just get by casting them sounds really cool. Shadow, 2-set bonus. The Shadow Word Death triggers 2 additional times at 50% effectiveness. Pretty cool. Triggers again 1 additional time at 50% effectiveness if Death Speaker is active or your target is below 20% health. So it's just echoed on execute. Obviously, you can cast Shadow Word Death outside of execute, which is what takes us to the 4-set. Each time you take damage from Shadow Word Death, you gain a stack of Death's Torment, increasing the initial damage of your next cast of Shadow Word Pain by 250%. This, I think, reminds me of Torghast, or the damage of your next Shadow Crash by 50%, and these stack 12 times. Now, I don't know if you're going to get 12 stacks, probably not, by the time you cast your next Pain or Crash, but if you do that, you gain a big hit on Pain. That is what, 2,600%, something like that, extra damage on the initial hit, which is not very big, but it, you know, it adds up. But Shadow Crash, that might be a different story. This is very interesting. I don't see how you can get 12 stacks by the time you recast any of these spells. So I guess it matters on the haste levels of Shadow. Moving to Shaman Elemental, the 2-set Primordial Wave, so you're gonna have to talent into it, also casts an Elemental Blast at the target at 100% effectiveness and grant you all 3 Elemental Blast bonus effects for 15 seconds. This is giga. The 4-set makes for the 10 seconds after using Primordial Wave, whenever you consume Lava Surge, your next Lightning Bolt or Chain Lightning is instant cast and deals 25% increased damage. This is probably the nuttiest bonus so far. In single target, it's probably gonna be good, but in AoE sounds broken. You're probably gonna have 3 to 4, at the very least, Flame Shocks up on the target, proccing you Lava Surges. A lot of Lava Surges, plus you have talents that give you Lava Surge procs, which is really good. Now, whenever you consume a Lava Surge, you gain a free, in this case, Chain Lightning, giving you a lot of Maelstrom. This sounds really cool. Plus, you could always use Surge of Power to AoE spread Lava Flame Shocks more. I think it still does that, which sounds really explosive in AoE. I cannot wait to see how this plays out. Enhancement has a more boring set. The 2-set makes Primordial Wave, so also Primordial, it's very heavy focus on Primordial Wave here. Summons a Lightning Feral Spirit that increases your nature damage dealt by 20% for 15 seconds. Obviously good. Nature damage is fine. Sure. Summoning a Feral, for the 4-set, summoning a Feral Spirit reduces the cooldown of Primordial Wave by 7 seconds. Does that mean that once you press your Primordial Wave, that Feral Spirit summoned already reduces its cooldown by 7 seconds, and then you press your Dogs, which also reduce the cooldown of Primordial Wave? Wasn't it a part of the rotation where you cast Dogs first and then Primordial Waves? Primordial Wave gave you... This is interesting. We'll see how this plays out, because Enhancement is not a picnic spec. Restoration, a 2-set bonus, makes Chain Heal, Healing Surge, and Healing Wave mark their targets with a title, their initial target, so for Chain Heal only 1 target, with a title Reservoir, causing them to receive 15% of all of Riptide healing you deal for 10 seconds. I would imagine 15% of a Riptide heal that you do from the point of this proccing, which is okay. okay, 15% doesn't say much, but yeah. Riptide's healing is increased by 15%. If Riptide is active on the same target as Tidal Reservoir, its heal over time effect has a 10% chance to create a new Riptide on a nearby ally. So I see this being played also with Primordial Wave because that also applies a Riptide, and I think we still have the Shadowlands Legendary that just gives you Riptide uptime. This could be very heavy onto Riptides, which is actually a fun playstyle as a hero because it's instant and it's a heal over time, and that always works in during progression because you don't want to be stuck there hard casting all the time, which you probably will still do because that's the 2-step bonus. Rogue, and we're getting to some of the best tier sets designed here. Not to mention that Rogue has talent changes, which we will have a video on. First of all, for the assassination, the 2-step bonus makes each 10 energy you spend granting Nature Blight, granting you 1% attack speed and 1% nature damage for 6 seconds. Multiple instances of Nature Blight may overlap, so they will not reset, and they can go all the way up to 15 stacks. So basically how Iron Fur works for Guardian Druid, but you can get extra attack speed and nature damage. Attack speed is fine. I feel like attack speed is probably benefits something like subtlety more than assassination, but sure. It's not haste, because haste would probably work towards haste or energy regeneration to an extent, but it's just attack speed, sure. Now, the Force makes Envenom with Envenom active, explodes, dealing nature damage to all enemies within 8 yards, deals reduced damage beyond 8 targets. Now, we don't know how much damage that is. Is it the full Envenom damage in AoE? Because that can be particularly crazy. I don't know what Envenom with Envenom active. What does that mean? Does that mean when your target already has the Envenom active on itself and then you press Envenom again, is that when it explodes? Because that means you might definitely want deeper stratagem, right? For the most amount of Envenom application, depending on how this works with the talent changes. This particularly solves some issues with Assassination AoE where you don't have to maintain, or maybe you still have to maintain, but some of its AoE is not locked behind some annoying maintenance. For the Outlaw, also really cool, the 2-step bonus makes Sinister Strike have an additional 15% chance to strike an additional time, and obviously this synergizes a lot with a lot of other talents. The 4-set makes Roll the Bones additionally refresh a random Roll the Bones combat enhancement buff you currently possess for 40 seconds. This sounds really cool and definitely gives you more uptime on multiple bosses and can potentially bring back the 6 buffs that Outlaw has, which I don't know if we've played with since Legion, which is really cool. Roll the Bones, Heavy Bonanza. That's really cool. Obviously, you're going to probably pick all the Roll the Bones talents. For Subtlety, the 2-set makes using Eviscerate, Rupture, or Black Powder have a chance to summon a Shadow Clone. This is so cool. To echo your finishing moves for 50% additional damage. Now, first of all, because I know what the 4-set does, we need to know how long that clone lasts for, because the 4-set makes your Shadow Clone deal 10% increased damage with all attacks and grant you 2 combo points per clone when summoned. So obviously, it's assumed that you will have a clone up once you use your finisher a second time, that you can have multiple clones up because the bonus functions on multiple clone uptime. So I would imagine the clone lasts for a certain amount of time, which seems similar to how Assassination wants to keep up a finisher buff and then use another finisher before that finisher buff expires. In this case, the buff is in the form of the Shadow Clone, so we're gonna want to, you know, spam back-to-back finishers, really quick successions. Probably a really fast playstyle will be ideal for this tier, so we'll see how it applies in the end. Going into Warlock, for Affliction, 2-set bonus makes Soul Rot deal 15% increased damage and last an additional 4 seconds. The 4-set makes Soul Rot cause your next 3 casts of Malefic Rapture within 12 seconds to deal 50% increased damage and extend the duration of your Agony, Corruption, Unstable Affliction, Haunt, Vile Taint, and Phantom Singularity by 2 seconds. This is interesting. It's a lot of dot maintenance. First of all, you will have talent into Soul Rot, clearly. Obviously, Soul Rot talents that go into the capstone are really good as well, but I can see this also forcing you kind of to talent into maybe Dread Touch, definitely Malefic Rapture talents. I don't know how restrictive the build will end up being. It sounds like it could be very restrictive, but overall, I guess the bonus is nice. Uptime on dots is really nice, particularly in AoE, but that's assuming that dots last in AoE. But since in AoE you don't really have all of your dots up at all times, this could probably be more of a single target thing. Maybe Affliction is back as the de facto Warlock spec for raiding. We'll see, because there's 2 more specs. Demonology has the 2-set bonus, make Demon Bolt apply Doom Brand that explodes after 20 seconds, kind of similar to the Doom Dot, and it deals 79 currently spell power damage in terms of shadow damage to nearby enemies. So once again, that, you know, you hit a single target and then trickles little damages to all other enemies. This does not seem to have a target cap, however, not at least that it's specified in the tooltip. Demon Bolt and Hand of Gul'dan reduce the duration of the primary target's Doom Brand by 1 second, which obviously is good. Definitely switches the spec towards very use of Demon Bolt and Hand of Gul'dan, which is what they tried to do with the Demonology talent swap around early this season, and now they're doing it with the tier set where there's a lot of focus on your, well, Hand of Gul'dan is not a builder, but on spells that you don't really get a lot of damage out of usually. For the 4 set, Hand of Gul'dan damage is increased by 15%. Hand of Gul'dan damage is usually very pitiful. I don't know how much 15% matters, but whatever. When Doombrand explodes, you have a chance to summon a Doom Fiend, yes, more demons, that blast your target for 81% spell power damage every 3 seconds for 15 seconds. This sounds like it's single target. I don't know if Doom Fiend does AoE damage. I guess single target is nice because AoE you're probably just gonna use imps to detonate anyway, but it's good that the Hand of Gul'dan buff that buffs your single target does not rely heavily on your imps being up or not. So you first of all have the Hand of Gul'dan 4 set bonus, and then you have the Hand of Gul'dan imp bonus that, you know, function separately from each other, which is actually, I think it's pretty. We'll see how it actually plays out in practice once you get to do some dungeons. Destruction has the 2 set immolate damage increased by 20%. Immolate periodic damage has a chance to grant a charge of Dimensional Rift. So you will have to talent into Dimensional Rift. No more short infernals. Plus you'll have to go all the way to the left side this time around. So maybe still infernal buffs, but no short infernal. I don't know. I guess we'll see. For the 4 set bonus, Dimensional Rift can now summon a powerful Flame Rift, which fires 20 searing bolts that deal some fire damage to its target and an additional smaller amount of damage over 10 seconds to nearby enemies. Now, once again, are those fire dots for the 10 seconds, or does it just shoot out for the 10 seconds to nearby enemies, or is that the duration of Flame Rift? I would imagine is the duration of Flame Rift. That sounds pretty cool. It's very restrictive once again in terms of the playstyle. You will not be playing the Ruin playstyle on the right hand side, which gives you blasphemies. I don't think you have enough points to make that function efficiently, but who knows? Maybe this can give more build variety where you're locked in on the left hand side, but maybe you can go either way, either on the middle, on the right hand side. Who knows? Last but not least, Warrior, baby. Arms. This is a pretty stupid tier set. The 2 set bonus makes rend damage increase by 30% and have a chance to trigger sudden death. Going into bleed damage, boys, be ready. 4 set bonus makes sudden death also cause your next execute to cut deeply, causing the target to bleed for 50% of the damage of the execute and trigger a thunderclap that deals 100% damage. How often does sudden death proc off of rend? And does sudden death that proc off of rend and sudden death from the talents also buff your 4 set? Does the 4 set work off of both sudden deaths? I would imagine it does, and it should. Now, then you have execute that will also apply a bleed on the target. How long does that bleed going to last for? Because we don't know. It doesn't say how long the bleed lasts for. And does it overlap? If you have multiple sudden death procs, does that bleed overlap into more? And what is with the thunderclap? I think whoever designed the arm set was like, dude, let's just give Arms Warrior big executes again. Yes, yes. What about AoE? Totally forgot about that. Let's just put a random thunderclap there. Just do more damage. It's just slapped in like, okay, we need some AoE damage. Put a thunderclap in there and let's just forget it. It's pretty stupid. Execute does thunderclap, sure. It sounds fun though. Now for Fury, Odin's Fury is back, baby, and you will have to talent into it because the 2 set makes it deal 50% increased damage and cause your next 3 Bloodthirsts to deal 150% additional damage. So most likely we're gonna go to Cold Steel Hot Blood again and have 100% increased critical strike chance against its primary target. Obviously, it doesn't work if you cleave it with Whirlwind, so it's only happening on a single target, meaning that it's pretty much guaranteed in Rage. I would imagine a Rage uptime will probably be 100% if it's not already 100%, so that's not even a thing anymore. But dealing a lot of damage is nice. Now, 4 set Bloodthirst Critical Strike reduce the cooldown of Odin's Fury by 2.5 seconds. This sounds fucking incredible. You will be a crit machine. Odin's Fury already has 45-second cooldown, which I don't think that might change, but the cooldown reduction might change because it sounds like you're going to be reducing its cooldown by quite a lot, and you're gonna have quite a bit of uptime on it, where I don't know if this 2.5 seconds sounds like quite a bit, because that's already 7.5 seconds just off the back. Odin's Fury gives you 3 guaranteed crits for your next Bloodthirst. Assuming that you're probably going to be building a lot of crit, you're probably going to be reducing its cooldown by at least 10 to 15 seconds, meaning that it can be all the way down to 30 seconds, even less. And in those 30 seconds, do you have time to cast 3 Bloodthirsts? Probably. It will definitely change the focus from Raging Blow. It might even skew the value of Bloodthirst way above Raging Blow, even if they're not buffed by the 2 set. I definitely see this happening. It's very interesting at the very least. Protection Warrior, also funky tier set. The 2-set bonus makes spending rage have a chance, once again a chance that we don't know, to cause your next shield slam to consume your bleeds on the target. And that's Rend, that's Deep Wounds, and that's Thunderous Roar maybe? Which, yay? To instantly deal 100% of the remaining damage and reducing the target's damage dealt to you by 10% for 5 seconds. This is pure single target. Unless you're just gonna target swap to shield slam around in AoE, you're probably gonna be doing that. That sounds boring, but hey, big single target damage. The 4-set makes your bleeds, when your bleeds are consumed on a target, their damage dealt to you is reduced by an additional 2% per bleed consumed, so maybe all the way up to reliably 4%, but probably all the way up to 6% as well. The cooldown of Thunderclap is reset. What? Okay, when your bleeds are consumed on a target, their damage dealt to you is reduced by an additional 2%. The Thunderclap cooldown being reduced means that you shield slam, you instantly Thunderclap, and you reapply Rend, which I guess that's good, once again for single target. And the cooldown of Thunderous Roar is reduced by 1 second. More cooldown reduction definitely means you're going to be talenting into kind of the same playstyle. I feel like Protection had kind of a slight variance to get the Shockwave capstone to have some AoE stun by sacrificing some cooldown reduction on Thunderous Roar, which you're not gonna do anymore, so you're even more locked into those two capstones. I don't know how that turns out. Dude, these tier sets are freaking amazing, and the 10.2 patch is crazy, and we already covered the main things that the patch is going to bring, and you can check it in this video with more 10.2 content coming right here on Marcelian Online.